I thank you for the opportunity to be part of this important webinar and reflecting in this, on these questions. So IFDC has been implementing the soil fertility enabler as part of the TAAT program. And I will dive right in and go question by question, as we've had a chance to reflect on several of these points in order to really get an effective demand for soil fertility management products. So with respect to the first question of how can we translate agricultural research into products for commercialization, I would like to use the context that we are in right now, where research centers have developed research products, which are mostly public goods by nature and are marketed using traditional extension services. I mean by that, the typical extension services available at both the local level and provided by several institutions, and to address the traditional constraints to technology adoption. By that, I mean constraints looking at the farmer level, production level, adoption constraints versus market system lens to looking at technology adoption. So these types of research products, in order to bring them to the market and commercialize them, you must focus on three conditions, and this is based on our experience. There must be an effective demand for the research product. That is demand that is backed up by rich purchasing power. Farmers must have the incentive and the capacity for technology adoption. By that, I mean there must be crop response, sufficient crop response. There must be an attractive price for the product. There must be access to finance, access to knowledge, and the product must be available at the right time, etc. So, and finally, the delivery methods. These are the approaches, the interventions, which address the root causes of market failures. So these are value chain specific interventions, that seek to modify the incentives, schemes, and the behavior of market players. So market players, not just farmers, but so not just a focus at the production level, but public, private, formal, informal sector, to ensure that you have long-lasting behavioral changes at the farmers level. Next slide, please.
It's your screen. It's your computer. We're watching.
Okay, sorry. I thought, so as an example, this is a dryness indicator card that was produced by the Horticulture Innovation Lab. So, and this was introduced in Northern Ghana, and this card is basically used to check the dryness of the product. So you just put it in you just put the product in the bag, put the card in there, wait a few minutes, and you look at the colors, which tells you the status of your product. So we have introduced these cards and focus on sensitizing and training farmers. So these cards were already developed, and you have to work our way backward and to strengthen the demand for these types of technologies. In respect to question 2, if a market system approach can lead to rapid technology adoption by the end user, yes. So that is the ideal scenario, to let the market, the demand for the product, drive the entire research, product generation, and commercialization process. So there are prospects for this. There are prospects for this to happen, and you must start with an understanding of why markets have failed to meet the needs of farmers in that very specific value chain. So Robin's presentation was very interesting in that they have been able to just do that. And so use this understanding of market failure, the causes of market failure, to define and implement interventions that modify the incentives and the behavior of market players. So again, the beans sector, the beans, FABRA was able to do that, and farmers had a market for which for the specific products that they invested in. So the research product must be an effective solution to an existing constraint. So you cannot have a product that is technology intensive, knowledge intensive, capital intensive, labor intensive in an environment that has these constraints. So the constraint, the environment is important. Ownership is important. So farmers must be involved in the technology development process. By that, what do I mean? I mean, you have to take farmers' preferences, farmers' constraints, farmers' demand into account. So I have seen situations where you have improved varieties that can triple, quadruple yields, but farmers are not adopting them. Let's take millet sorghum, for instance. And if you go talk to the farmers, they will tell you, well, yeah, great, but they don't taste the same as our traditional varieties, or the stocks are too short. So you realize that, well, the long stocks, they had a big demand for the long stocks to do several other things which were not taken into account. So this is partly the reason why you have a lot of technologies sitting on the shelf. And so it is also important to have the private sector to be part of the process. Actually, the private sector must drive the process for you to have a sellable product. The technology also must be a proven technology. It must be shown that it's adaptable to agroecological conditions and socioeconomic conditions of the end users. The profitability of the technology must be demonstrated for you to have adoption and farmers to have an incentive to adopt the technology. And of course, you have the ease of access to market, both accessing the technology and selling the product of the technology. So an example, a case in point in that is in a program that we have called the 2-Scale program, where we match innovations with partnership constraints. So basically, we know the types of constraints that farmers are looking to solve, and then we launch a call for innovations. And so we'll respond to that call. Small innovators, entrepreneurs, those who have developed the products that can address these constraints. And so from the scouting of innovation, you screen them, you match the innovation with the partnership, and you put together a business deal. So this, an example to illustrate that we have done in Nigeria is with the Ignitia Weather Service provider, where they provide forecast information to farmers via SMS. And this addresses a problem of farmers knowing when to plant, when will it rain, and planting on time. And so connecting Ignitia to providing this service to farmers could solve that problem for sorghum farmers. This program is being replicated in Mali, in Ghana, and our priorities right now is to design a fee-paying model to integrate the cost of SMS and adapt the SMS packages to the needs and the financial capacity of farmers, and also improve women access to these technologies. Quickly going over the last question of the agripreneurship opportunities within the TAAT value chains to trigger industrialization. Yes. And so this is why my slide is crowded, is because opportunities exist in product design, retailing, distribution, finished products, service provision, processing of strong agricultural produces, post-harvest processing. But I would like to focus on the opportunity that exists to by closing the gap, the yield gap, the gap that exists between the potential yield and the existing yield. So by adoption of improved agronomic practices, and which can feed into the industry as raw material for a finished product or an ingredient to another well-marketed product are good candidates. So for instance, let me take cassava. IITA is implementing the cassava compact. So the yield of about 15 tons per hectare can be doubled with improved agricultural practices. And cassava can be used in brewery and also in bakery and animal feeds. Also, it can be transformed in dairy and so many opportunities. Same thing with maize and same thing with rice. I'm sorry, I have two boys who are disturbing me here. So how do you engage the private sector to drive the technology generation and the technology diffusion process to ensure ownership and sustainability, ensure that you have a demand, the demand that is created by technology demonstration is met with the supply of appropriate inputs, and that you have a rate of adoption that enables you to have impact at scale. And so we have experimented and adopted a three-pronged approach to private sector engagement. I saw a lot of questions, participant questions here asking, what about the private sector? Why is not the private sector in this forum today? And it's a critical question, and they need to be on the table from the beginning. So you have to be able to identify, select key players. You have to be able to strengthen the capacity to address the demand, the constraints in the system, and you have to be able to create backward and forward linkages. So an example of that is what I call the caravan approach that we have used in Mali. It's a quick way of engaging the private sector to produce fertilizer briquettes for farmers. So what you do is that you train the private sector and you help them invest in the briquette machines, so which are loaded in the pickup trucks here, and then you make sure that there is a continuous demand for the briquettes. So you have already done your technology demonstrations, and a month before the planting season, you do the caravan. So on village market days, you go from village to village with the machines. So the private sector is there with the machines, and farmers come to bring their fertilizer to be briquetted. I mean, this has required strong collaboration between businessmen, technicians, communication actors, and it has allowed for timely provision of urea supergranules, which are very efficient for improving yield and while reducing the need for fertilizer. And then in terms of end result, in 2 weeks, we had 14 villages covered, and 2,000 bags of urea were used to produce 100 tons of briquettes. So that is it. I tried to go fast, so I leave some time to the last speaker. Thank you, and please tell me your questions, and I'll be happy to answer them. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. That's wonderful. I mean, you've done very well. I tried to bring you in between the two compacts, the stories on beans, and we're going to listen to the next one on wheat. And I tried to bring you in between just to juxtapose some of the great ideas in terms of working the market, you know, because Robin had just given us a good dose of how you have to have a continuous listening and responding to the market, how you ensure actions, collaborations, partnerships, actors, you know, all requiring continuous capacities of these actors to respond to the market. And Dr. Camara, you've tried to now tell us some of the actions that need to be taken, factors that drive this market, you know, issue about involvement of the actors themselves, issues to do with, you gave an example of this caravan approach, which I think I know about and I really like. But the involvement of the actors, the ownership, issue of ownership, issue of profitability, easy access, all these things that we sometimes overlook and take for granted. These are the big things that drive the market if we want to really commercialize these value chains that we're talking about. Thank you very much. I think you had great examples